Welcome back to CNN's breaking news coverage of President Trump's address. We just heard it to senior U.S. military officers at the Marine base at Quantico, Virginia.
Let's go live now to CNN senior reporter Daniel Dale for a fact check. All right, Daniel, what stood out to you?
There were just so many false claims, and I say that after essentially every speech, unfortunately, from President Donald Trump.
I just caught the highlights from President Trump's recent address to top U.S. military officers at the Marine base in Quantico, Virginia. Honestly, it was quite a spectacle. It felt like a typical Trump speech filled with quite a few false claims, which, regrettably, I find myself saying more often than not. What made this one particularly noteworthy was his audience. He was spinning tales and tossing around inaccuracies in front of the nation's military leaders, no less. He boasted about having the mightiest military in the world, claiming you'd never hear President Biden say such a thing. It's honestly hard to believe he said that out loud.
So I want you to listen to something he said about former President Joe Biden and Biden's comments about the U.S. military.
I go around bragging about that. I said, we have the strongest military anywhere in the world. I say it. You never heard Biden say that. Never heard him say anything. But you never heard him say, did you ever hear him say, we have the strongest military? He doesn't say that. I say it.
In reality, it's a quick Google search to find President Biden making similar statements repeatedly. Just last year, he remarked that our military is the strongest military in the history of the world. Not just the strongest today, but in all of history. That's a pretty significant distinction. Yet it's brushed aside. Now picture this. You're one of the world's key figures mingling with business tycoons and heads of state at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. All eyes are on you when Donald Trump strides up to the podium for what is meant to be a powerful speech about America's global leadership.
And he made another false claim about President Biden and the military, falsely claiming at another point in the speech today that President Biden had suggested early in this term that he could get rid of the Space Force established under President Trump. Listen to that quote.
The Space Force turned out to be a very important thing. I said from the beginning, you know, when Biden came into office, he wanted to terminate it. He said, and this thing called Space Force, so we could get rid of that. And he got hammered by the people in this room for even suggesting it, because it's very important.
Within moments, the reactions in the room shift. You can feel the mood souring as gasps, groans, and nervous laughter ripple through the audience. Trump carries on discussing absurd topics like taking over Greenland, confronting NATO allies directly, and making offhand comments about Somali immigrants. And remember, all of this is being recorded for the world to see. By the time he wraps up, fact-checkers are hard at work dissecting his words.
Psaki never said he was going to get rid of it, and she said the very next day that they were not getting rid of Space Force, that they would preserve it. So those are just two of a whole bunch of false claims from President Trump today. He also repeated his usual lie that the 2020 election involving him and Biden was rigged. Of course, he lost fair and square. He repeated this lie that he tells over and over, that the Congo and Venezuela both emptied their prisons to somehow allow prisoners to come to the United States as migrants.
News outlets are labeling it a complete disaster, and social media is buzzing with clips that spread like wildfire. His grand moment turned into an unexpected mess. It's just surreal how everything went downhill so fast. He made another false claim about President Biden and the military, insisting that Biden had previously suggested getting rid of the Space Force, which was set up during Trump's own presidency. It's honestly hard to believe he said that out loud.
That happened. President Trump's own team has never been able to offer any corroboration, and I've spoken to independent experts on both the Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Venezuela, who have said they've seen nothing to support any of that. President Trump again repeated this claim we've been hearing from him that Biden let in 25 million migrants. That's up from President Trump's former claim of 21 million. Even that was false. So the actual number is less than half of that.
He was going on about how Biden wanted to terminate it, and then he claimed that people in the room really pushed back against that idea because the Space Force is supposedly very important. This all went down on January 21st, 2026 at Davos. This was supposed to be Trump's coming back moment on the international stage, showing everyone that America is strong and under his control. But instead, he started this strange rant about Greenland. Yes, you heard that right, Greenland. He was telling a group of European leaders that the U.S. needs to take control of Greenland for national and global security, and he called it just a very small ask.
But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. Okay? I would like to make a deal, the easy way, but if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way.
A very small ask, as if he were just borrowing a cup of sugar. The reactions in the room were something else. The BBC's economics editor noted there was a mixed response to his speech, which is journalist talk for people. We're pretty uncomfortable. It was clear that some folks didn't know whether to clap or just walk out. What's wild is that Trump didn't let it go after bringing up Greenland once. He came back to it repeatedly. He even felt the need to clarify that he wouldn't use force to take it over. Honestly, if you need to say you're not planning to invade somewhere, that's already a bit of a red flag. And on top of that, he was mixing up basic facts. Fact checkers pointed out he confused Greenland with Iceland. I mean, come on, you're addressing some of the most powerful people in the world, and you can't keep two islands straight. This is just wild. Trump's speech at Davos was something else, that's for sure. Here he was facing a crowd of European leaders slamming NATO for not spending enough on defense, just calling them freeloaders. It's wild to think these were the same allies trying to deal with Russia's war in Ukraine and managing a global energy crisis. Not to mention they're supposed to be our partners. Yet there he was insulting them right in front of them. You could practically hear the groans from the audience. The tension was thick. This wasn't a campaign rally in Iowa. This was Davos with diplomats and world leaders all around. And Trump treated it like he was on stage handling hecklers. Then he shifted gears to talk about immigration, specifically targeting Somali immigrants. He used a fraud case from Minnesota to make some pretty demeaning and dehumanizing remarks, which only added to the discomfort in the room. People were genuinely shocked because, honestly, even for Trump, this felt over the top, and the cameras were rolling. Every word, every gasp was being captured and broadcasted for the world to see. Before long, the internet lit up. Outlets like the New York Times, BBC, and Al Jazeera were quick to fact-check him, labeling the speech a barrage of falsehoods and dissecting every inaccuracy. The narrative shifted rapidly from Trump giving a significant speech at Davos to him making a fool of himself on the global stage. It makes you wonder what he was trying to achieve. If he wanted to appear strong and presidential, that clearly didn't happen. If the aim was to assure allies that America is dependable, he missed the mark. And if he thought he could project competence and stability, he totally failed there, too. Instead, he came off as obsessed with land grabs and appeared reckless, as if he didn't grasp basic geography or diplomacy. The entire world tuned in to see this unfold in real time. This was a disaster, and it's important we unpack why it matters. So, let's dive into what really went down during this speech at Davos. Honestly, the more I think about it, the worse it seems, especially given the reactions from the global community and some Republicans. It clearly didn't go well. Let's start by discussing Greenland. Trump's fixation on Greenland goes way back. He first brought up the idea of buying it during his initial term in 2019, suggesting that the U.S. should purchase Greenland from Denmark. The Prime Minister of Denmark immediately shot that down, calling it absurd, which understandably made Trump pretty upset. In fact, he even canceled a state visit to Denmark because his feelings were hurt over it. That seemed like ancient history, and I thought he had moved on from that one. But nope, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he resurrected the idea. This time, he didn't just want to buy Greenland. He was talking about controlling it. He framed it as a matter of national security, claiming that the U.S. needs Greenland for both national and global safety, as if that was a totally reasonable thing to assert. Here's the kicker, though. Greenland isn't for sale. It's not on the market at all. It's an autonomous part of Denmark. The population of about 56,000 is mainly made up of indigenous Greenlanders who have their own government, culture, and language. Time and again, they've expressed that they have zero interest in becoming part of the United States. Denmark, too, has made it quite clear that Greenland is not something that's up for negotiation. So when Trump stood up in Davos and said this was a very small ask, it makes me think he's either totally out of touch or just plain lying, because really it's not a small ask. It's outright ludicrous asking a sovereign nation to give up a vast territory that they have controlled for centuries. And then he kind of digs himself deeper, saying he wouldn't use force. Honestly, why even mention that? The fact that he felt the need to clarify that the U.S. wouldn't invade Greenland is chilling. It implies that someone in his circle might have considered that option, and Trump had to backtrack publicly on it. But even after clarifying that he wouldn't use force, he kept pushing, insisting that negotiations are necessary. He argued that Greenland's future is linked to U.S. security, treating it as if it were a real estate deal, like some golf course he wants to snag. Meanwhile, the international community is just watching all of this play out, probably thinking, what in the world is happening? And it's not just about Greenland. The speech took various wild turns, and he even took shots at NATO again. That's been one of his favorite targets for years now. Trump has this idea that European countries aren't putting enough money into their own defense. And while there's definitely a conversation to be had about NATO funding, he doesn't really do the whole debate thing. Instead, he resorts to insults and belittling remarks. At DVOS, he practically called European leaders freeloaders on American military strength, warning that they need to cough up or else. He delivered this message face-to-face in front of a crowd of diplomats and world leaders, and people were noticeably reacting. A reporter from the BBC described the responses as mixed, but mixed doesn't quite capture the discomfort in that room. There were groans, and it felt like he was treating close allies as if they were enemies. Now, why should we care about this? NATO isn't just another alliance. It's really the backbone of Western security. It's why Europe has enjoyed stability for so long, and why Russia hasn't moved further into Eastern Europe. With Trump undermining this alliance, he's making European leaders question the reliability of the United States and their commitments. This kind of uncertainty only serves to weaken the alliance, making the world a less safe place, all for the sake of scoring points with his supporters and trying to appear tough. Those international leaders in that room could sense the recklessness of it all. Then he moved on to immigration, bringing up a fraud case from Minnesota that involved Somali immigrants. Trump took that and ran with it, making sweeping and dehumanizing generalizations about immigrants, painting them as burdens, criminals, and dangerous individuals. The room reacted again because this is Davos, a global forum filled with people from all over the world, including immigrants who have built businesses, created jobs, and contributed to society. Yet here he was treating immigrants like they're nothing but a problem to be dealt with. It was shocking, to say the least, and it didn't stop at just one comment. He kept hammering home the ties between immigration, crime, and welfare, pulling out every negative stereotype he could muster. This isn't a new pattern for Trump. He has been demonizing immigrants from the very start. Back in 2015, he infamously called Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals. In 2017, he made headlines for keeping Muslims out of the country, and he took an especially harsh stance by separating families at the border. He insulted countries in Africa by calling them whole countries. And fast forward to 2026, he's still at it, still using that same racist, dehumanizing language. This time, though, he does it on an international stage, right in front of leaders who should be able to respect him. But instead, they're left feeling disgusted. After one of his speeches, fact-checkers dove right in and discovered a mountain of false claims. Trump twisted the truth about NATO funding, misrepresented the U.S. economy, and even got his geography mixed up between Greenland and Iceland. Major outlets like the New York Times, BBC, and Al-Azhar all jumped in to highlight the flood of inaccuracies during his address. One even described it as a barrage of false claims. Not a great way to be remembered after a big international speech. And here's the kicker. Trump doesn't care. He'll brush it all off as fake news, claim the media is lying, and insist that fact-checkers are biased. His supporters eat it up. But the leaders in that room, the ones who actually have to work with him, they know better. They saw the truth unfold right before their eyes. They left thinking, this guy is dangerous. This guy is unstable. This guy can't be trusted. That's where the real damage lies. It's not just about the lies or the racism or his fixation on Greenland. It's about how he stood in front of some of the most powerful people in the world and displayed exactly who he is. A liar, a bully, a wannabe authoritarian who believes he can take whatever he wants. They noticed, they reacted, and now those clips are everywhere. The backlash, it's everywhere too. Trump is stuck, unable to spin his way out of it because every word, every moment of this speech is captured on camera for all time. So let's take a step back and think about what this disaster at Davos truly signifies. This isn't just a tale of a single bad speech. It reflects a pattern of behavior that's been ongoing for years. It's about the fallout from having a president who lacks self-control. Let's dive into a couple of key points that caught my attention. First up, the whole Greenland situation. It's honestly hard to believe he keeps bringing this up. What's the deal with this obsession? I think it comes down to how Trump views the world. He sees himself as a deal maker who thinks everything is up for grabs. To him, countries are just assets to be bought or sold, and Greenland, well, in his eyes, it's a treasure chest filled with natural resources and military advantages sitting right by Russia. So, he wonders why the United States shouldn't just claim it. He really doesn't seem to grasp that you can't just take over another country's territory because you feel like it. All this talk shows he misses the whole point about sovereignty and diplomacy. To him, it's just about making deals, regardless of how bizarre that sounds. But here's the kicker. Greenland isn't another one of his golf courses or hotels. It's home to a community with its own history and government. And guess what? The people living there don't want to be part of the United States. They've made that clear multiple times. Yet he keeps pushing. Every time he brings it up, it makes the U.S. look weaker because it shows that our president isn't clued in on basic international standards. It's like he thinks he can just bulldoze through anything to get what he desires in the rest of the world. They're definitely noticing and adjusting their strategies. Now let's talk about NATO. His attacks on this alliance are downright risky. Sure, I get that some folks might say he has a point. European nations should chip in more for their own defense, and that's a reasonable discussion to have. But there's a fine line between negotiating fair contributions and outright undermining the whole alliance. And Trump crosses that line. He doesn't just ask for more funds. He questions whether the U.S. should even be involved in NATO. He talks about potentially pulling out and threatens to ditch allies if they don't meet his demands. That kind of talk is music to Russia's ears, considering they've been aiming to weaken NATO for ages. And here's where it gets serious. NATO isn't merely a military pact. It's a political alliance built on trust. It's all about the idea that if one country is attacked, the others will jump in to help. The whole idea behind Article 5 of the NATO treaty is pretty straightforward. When one nation gets attacked, it's like all of us are under fire. This promise is what has kept Europe safe since the end of World War II. But when the President of the United States hints that he might not stick to that promise, it raises a lot of eyebrows. What's the point of having an alliance if that trust isn't there? With that sort of chatter, countries aren't going to want to work with us. They'll stop sharing intelligence and come up with their own plans instead. It's pretty clear that if this continues, the U.S. would find itself in a tough spot, isolated and weaker. Then there's the whole issue of racism. What Trump said about Somali immigrants at Davos wasn't just offensive. It was also part of a calculated move. He's using those kinds of comments to rally his supporters. When he goes after immigrants with harsh language, they eat it up, they cheer, they spread it around on social media, and they open their wallets. It's a tactic that works, but it comes with its own set of problems. This approach pushes away minority voters, young people, and even those suburban folks who don't want anything to do with outright racism. Come 2026, those voters could make a big difference because just relying on his base won't cut it. He's going to need those swing voters, moderates, people who may not be his biggest fans but think economic stability is more important than his controversial comments. Every time he goes on a racially charged rant, he risks alienating more of them. and it doesn't stop at domestic issues. His comments hurt America's reputation on the global stage, too. When he talks about immigrants the way he did at Davos, other countries take notice. Nations with significant immigrant populations start questioning their partnership with the U.S., while those that prioritize human rights begin to pull away. Countries that once saw America as a symbol of freedom and opportunity might start doubting that view, that moral authority, that ability to influence others softly. It's genuine and it matters, yet Trump seems to be tossing it aside day after day. Finally, we have the lies. It's no shocker that his speech at Davos was packed with falsehoods because, let's face it, Trump has a history of bending the truth. What's striking, though, is how open he is about it now. He doesn't even bother to disguise it anymore. He just says whatever pops into his head, and when fact-checkers point out the inaccuracies, he shifts the blame onto the media, labeling them as fake news. Supporters of Trump might believe everything he says, but let's be real, the rest of the world doesn't buy it. They have access to the same information and can clearly see when he's being dishonest. This lack of honesty really chips away at trust, making it harder for other countries to take the U.S. seriously. If the president is known for constant lies, why should anyone else have any faith in us or enter into agreements? What's truly frightening is that Trump's fibs go beyond just policies. They touch on reality itself. He often misstated facts during his speech at Davos, things that anyone can easily verify. When you have a leader who muddles the lines between fact and fiction or just doesn't care, that's a red flag. After all, effective foreign policy hinges on having accurate information, a solid grasp of facts, and making decisions based on a genuine understanding of reality. If Trump is living in a fantasy where Greenland is a small favor, NATO is a scam, and immigrants are all criminals, then good luck with making wise decisions. Spoiler alert, he's not making them. Now, looking at the political side of things, that Davos speech is going to linger in Trump's shadow. Clips are going viral. The fact checks are pouring in, and international backlash is very real. Democrats are gearing up to capitalize on this. They're likely to run ads showcasing Trump offending allies, highlighting his racist remarks, and showing all the fact checks with the message, "This is who Trump really is." For some voters, that's going to resonate. Sure, his base may not care. They'll have his back no matter what. But there are swing voters and independents out there, those who might have voted for Trump in 2024 but are now reconsidering. They're watching and starting to ask themselves if this is truly what they signed up for. Is this making America great again? Or is it just a chaotic mess? That's the reality with Trump. He brings a whirlwind of chaos wherever he goes. There's a new scandal, controversy, or mortifying moment every day. People begin to wear thin on it. Even those who like his policies, they may start thinking that maybe it's time for someone who can be, normal for just a few minutes. Someone who won't embarrass us globally, who can deliver a speech without the lies, insults, or basic geographical mix-ups. That feeling of fatigue and exhaustion is really starting to build up. So let's talk about Trump's recent speech at Davos. It was meant to highlight American strength, but instead it ended up showing just how dysfunctional things have become in the U.S. It revealed that the president seems fixated on land grabs, has a tendency to disrespect our allies, uses racially charged language, constantly lies, and frankly has a poor grasp of how diplomacy works. And to top it all off, it was all caught on camera. Every cringeworthy gasp, every awkward moment is out there for everyone to see. And there's no way for Trump to spin this one around. What's really concerning is that this speech is just one of many we'll likely see from him. He's going to keep saying outrageous things, keep spreading falsehoods, and keep throwing insults because that's simply who he is. With every remark, America's standing in the world diminishes a little more. Our alliances wobble a bit and our credibility chips away. Unfortunately, we all bear the consequences of this. The people present at Davos aren't just anyone. They represent some of the sharpest and most influential minds across the globe. After watching Trump's speech, they walked out thinking, this guy is a problem. This guy is dangerous, and this guy cannot be trusted. This isn't some media fabrication. It's the reality of the situation. No amount of spin can alter that truth. So, if you've stuck around to this point, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment to share your thoughts. Do you think Trump's disastrous speech at Davos is going to lead to serious consequences, or will it fade from memory in a